Hi, I'm Dory Stone, and I'm here to present an overview of the proposed evaluation plan for the Inga Foundation's Land for Life project in Honduras. The goal of the Land for Life project is to implement on a landscape scale the Inga model as a sustainable alternative to slash and burn agriculture, which destroys vast quantities of rainforest worldwide as subsistence farmers clear the rainforest to produce crops using this method that rapidly degrades the soil so that yields decline, and farmers are trapped in a cycle of poverty as they have to continue clearing more and more rainforest in order to try to survive. And ultimately, yields become so low that farmers can no longer sustain themselves on the land and have to migrate for work. The basic logic or theory of change of the Land for Life project is that if subsistence farmers in Central America are given, upon their request, the materials, training, and assistance to establish the Inga model on their land, then they will cease clearing the rainforest to produce crops, their livelihoods and quality of life will improve, and significant environmental restoration will occur. Now, of course, we know that the mechanisms by which those changes happen are all included within that green arrow there in the center of the screen. Those are the actual biological processes such as nitrogen fixation and prevention of soil erosion that make the Inga model work. And of course, grant funders, policymakers, and most members of the general public do not have the scientific background to understand those mechanisms. So having data on ultimate outcomes of the program at the household level, at the landscape level, will really help those grant funders and members of the public to understand how this program helps, even if they don't understand the mechanisms by which that occurs. The basic purpose and goals of this evaluation are, first and foremost, to fulfill the Light a Single Candle Foundation's request for data on household livelihoods. Secondarily, to assess current extent of implementation of the program and update maps. And third, to collect data about program outcomes for presenting to prospective new donors. Another possible benefit of doing this evaluation is that it may yield insights that also lead to future program improvements. We are operating within a number of constraints. First of all, the Light a Single Candle Foundation has requested that data be provided with the annual report in late October of this year. They have provided a $10,000 budget for this evaluation, which will fund the salary for the new staff member who will be collecting data, as well as covering any data collection expenses, such as transportation or supplies. We also are operating during the rainy season in Honduras, so there's a possibility that access to visiting farmers may be impeded by weather. And of course, we are operating across 3 different countries and time zones and 2 different languages. So all of these are possible constraints that could limit what we're able to do, but this evaluation plan has been designed and planned with all of these in mind, so that hopefully it will be a realistic and practical plan for the organization at this point in time. Key questions this evaluation seeks to answer are: 1. To what extent has the Inga model been implemented? 2. To what extent have livelihoods improved for participating families? And 3. How has the program benefited the environment? This has been designed as a culturally responsive evaluation, meaning that all evaluation documents and processes will be provided in both Spanish and English. Also, that the design is collaborative in nature, seeking to foster participation among the organization's external leadership, the on-the-ground team in Honduras, and myself as an external evaluator. Culturally responsive also means that the survey will be administered by someone who has a shared culture, language, and background with the survey respondents. And lastly, that there will be opportunities for farmers to share their perceptions and experiences of the program in their own words. The evaluation team consists of myself, a graduate student of measurement and evaluation at American University, Abraham Martinez Raudales, the INGA field director and lead forester, as well as the new forester who has recently been hired who will be assisting with data collection. And also, of course, Mike Hans, INGA Foundation founder and director, and Lorraine Potter, INGA Foundation executive secretary. So this is our core team that will be working together to implement the evaluation. Following is an overview of data to be collected and the methods for collecting it. This will be organized by those 3 evaluation questions listed previously. So first, to what extent has the INGA model been implemented? This question will be answered using field records and GIS satellite images to confirm the coordinates of INGA plots and update maps. That will enable us to confirm the total number of participating households and total hectares currently planted in the INGA model. Additionally, a household survey will enable us to quantify the number and percent of households who have adopted each of the 5 components of the INGA model, as well as their initial date of adoption. Moving on to our second question, to what extent have livelihoods improved? That same household survey will give us information on annual household income, percent of domestic firewood grown on farm, typical labor hours per week for sustenance, the necessity to migrate for work, and frequency and severity of household food shortage. Because baseline data was not collected at the outset of this program, we will be relying on participant recall, relying on farmers to remember and report as accurately as possible how these factors looked when they first began participating in the program and how they look now. We'll also include some open-ended interview questions because this allows respondents to give a more rich and detailed description and gives us a more holistic understanding of the impacts of the program. So possible interview questions are: how has your family's life changed since adopting the INGA model? And how have storms and droughts impacted you compared to nearby families without INGA? And for our third question, how has the program benefited the environment? Again, we can use those current and historical satellite images and the GPS coordinates of INGA plots to calculate how many hectares of degraded land have been restored through this program. Our household survey will ask farmers how many hectares of forest they used to clear and burn for crop production annually prior to planting INGA, and how many now. And another open-ended question: what changes have you observed on your land since adopting the INGA model? These could be changes to soil, water, plants, wildlife, etc. This is a mixed methods evaluation, meaning that it collects both quantitative or numerical data as well as qualitative or descriptive data to allow a more complete understanding of the program and more reliable findings. Because of the time and budget constraints, we won't be able to survey every household that has implemented the INGA model, so it will be necessary to take a stratified random sample of participants. Because the families implementing the INGA model are relatively homogeneous, we don't need to stratify that sample based on income level or ethnicity, but it will be useful to stratify based on region to make sure that we have adequate representation of farms in all 3 regions where the program is operating. And my recommendation would be to include at least 20% of all households from each region to ensure that we have a representative sample. These are the ways that the previously described data will be analyzed. On our question, to what extent has the INGA model been implemented, using that GIS mapping software, we can calculate the total hectares of the INGA model established, and with our household survey, calculate the percentage of households who have adopted each of the 5 components of the INGA model. In terms of livelihoods, we'll take the data and calculate changes between the initial year of planting and now, and then disaggregate the households based on the length of time since that initial planting, so that we can compare those groups who have been participating in the program for longer and differentiate those from ones who have just recently begun. An example of possible findings would be, for those who planted Inga at least 5 years ago, household income has increased on average by 200%. Just hypothetical, but an example of the way the findings would be conveyed. And for our interview data, we'll use a process called coding to categorize participant responses so that we can identify the major themes and calculate the frequency of the most commonly reported outcomes. So for example, 65% of families reported improvements to their nutrition since adopting the Inga model. And finally, how has the program benefited the environment? Again, once we have that geographic data and know the total number of hectares planted in Inga, we can then use carbon models to estimate the amount of atmospheric carbon that has been sequestered. Using the survey data, the percent of households who have entirely abandoned slash and burn practices will be calculated. And by multiplying the number of years since initial planting times the change in number of hectares burned annually, we will know how many hectares have been spared from burning during the course of the program, and we can then use carbon models to estimate the carbon emissions that have been avoided by avoiding burning all of that land since program inception. And again, with our interview data, we'll use coding to identify the most common responses and their frequency. So possible finding would sound like 30% of households who had adopted the Inga model at least 5 years ago reported seeing new springs emerge on their land. A brief evaluation timeline. This month, April 2022, we'll finalize this evaluation plan. And then, of course, in May, the documentary is being filmed, and so everybody will be focused on that, and we'll put this process on hold here. In June 2022, we can complete the creation of the household survey, and I will assist with household selection for the survey because as an external consultant who doesn't have familiarity with the region and the farmers, I'm less likely to have selection bias. So we can just get a representative sample. And then the new forester and I can also begin preliminary work on confirming GPS coordinates and updating the maps. From July through August of this year, the household surveys will take place, and the new forester will be going out and visiting households to administer the survey and entering the responses into a database, and we'll continue working on the mapping project. Each month, June, July, and August, during the final week of the month, I'll check in with the other evaluation team members just to see where we're at and track our progress and see if anything needs to be adjusted. Once all the survey results are in September of this year, I will conduct an analysis of the results and draft an evaluation report, which I will provide to the full team for review and feedback by October 1st. This will allow us a 2-week period for review, feedback, and revision of the report, with the final evaluation report completed and submitted to the entire team on October 15th, in time to provide that information to the Light a Single Candle Foundation. The final report will include a concise narrative summary of findings, case studies highlighting stories of success, graphic visualizations to present the data in a clear and compelling way, and all of this will be included in a professionally formatted 10 to 15 page PDF file that's ready to include with program reports and grant proposals. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really interested to hear your input and feedback on this evaluation plan.